Rano obrazovanje djece, dobrobiti ranog stimulisanja mozga, obrazovne metode produktivne za djecu predškolskog uzrasta veoma su aktuelne pedagoške i naučne teme u svijetu posljednjih decenija. Mnoga istraživanja vode ka zaključcima da se naši kognitivni kapaciteti razvijaju onoliko koliko mi radimo na njima, naročito u ranom uzrastu. Do važnih iskustvenih potvrda ove teze dolaze i inovatori u obrazovanju širom svijeta koji rade sa djecom od malih nogu. Jedan takav primjer su Helen Doron škole engleskog, u kojima djeca počinju da uče jezik već sa 3 mjeseca. Helen Doron, lingvista, obrazovni stručnjak, autorka inovativne metodologije za učenje engleskog jezika, nedavno je posjetila Crnu Goru povodom 5-godišnjice postojanja njenih škola u našoj zemlji. Mrs. Doron, your global educational network, Helen Doron English Group, has been recognized in international competition as Best Children's and Education Franchise in 2019. You have 3 million students, 1,000 learning centers in almost 40 countries all over the world, 5,000 active teachers. Your youngest students are 3 months old babies. Your oldest students are 19 years old. How did you achieve this? How did it all start back then in 1980s?
In the 1980s, well, my daughter was 4 years old. She already had 2 younger brothers. And I said it's time for her to learn music. So I found a violin class that taught 4-year-olds to play music without notes. It's called the Suzuki method by Dr. Suzuki. And he said that children, Dr. Suzuki didn't teach, it was a methodology that it was a teacher who'd been trained by him and his school was teaching my daughter. And the methodology said that music is a language, but just like it's a language, they should learn to speak it first, and only afterwards should they learn to read and write it, i.e. learn to play the music, and at a later stage, learn to read and write. Why? Because that's how children learn their mother tongue. You don't say to a baby, don't talk now. Talk when you're 5 years old and you can read and write, then you'll do it properly. No, of course not. You speak to the baby, you speak and you speak and you speak. Input equals output. As much as you put in is what's going to come out. And one day the baby has the confidence, opens his mouth and says, Mama. And Mama goes, wow. The baby thinks, wow, I did that really well. Should I do it again? Do you want to hear me do it again? And says Mama 1,000 times before actually going on to say something else. If Mama had just said, don't think much of that, can you say Dada instead? Baby would have been discouraged and might not have ever spoken. But nobody does that because we know how to encourage babies to speak. So the Suzuki method said first hear the music, and his methodology was twice daily at home, hearing the music. Come to the class and the teacher will teach you how to use your fingers and we'll play a few games to make it fun too. And I read all the literature and I said, Dr. Suzuki is teaching the language of music. I'm a linguistic scientist. Why aren't we teaching the music of language? Because that is how children should be learning. This was 1984. At that time, it was unheard of. Everybody started late. Earliest I'd heard of starting English was the age of 7 in some progressive primary schools. But normally people started language in secondary school or towards the end of the primary school. Nobody started early. Why? For 2 reasons. They didn't understand the importance of language at early start, which we now know as a scientific fact today is very important. And they didn't know how to do it. They just didn't know how to do it. If they knew how to do it, they would have done it. And they didn't have the right teachers, they didn't have the right books, they didn't know anything. So they did it the way they knew, which is the way they'd done it, and which is the way their parents had done it. So I went about at that time saying, right, I've studied linguistics, I can do this. I'm in a country which doesn't speak English, so I will teach the children English. I want to take the 1 to 6-year-olds. And I asked for groups of up to 8 children, aged 1 to 6. I created cassettes of songs, rhymes, stories. I changed these cassettes every 2 months. For 2 months, they listened to this intensively while in the class with me. They learnt the meaning of this. Twice daily hearing at home while playing, eating, going to bed. And then they came to learn the meaning with me. That means no rote repetition. We didn't need to repeat things. They had it in their head. It was in their long-term memory, peripheral learning. But with me in the classroom, they learnt the meaning. And parents started to ask, can you teach my 8-year-old, my 10-year-old, my 12-year-old? I started to get people from 2 hours away contacting me, 3 hours away. Can you come and teach? And the answer was no. No, I can't. I'm busy. So I have 3 young kids trying to balance teaching as well. No, that's the way it is. But I turned around to my husband and I said, I have to duplicate myself. And that's what I set out doing, to duplicate myself for teacher training courses and professional materials. And that's how it started.
Yeah. So the main aha moment was that insight that you could translate the language of music into the music of language.
That's right. Dr. Suzuki saying that we're teaching the language of music, and I said, no, we should be also teaching the music of language. Because what do children learn first in language? It's intonation. It's the sing-song part of it. That's what they learn first. They learn the tune, the feel, how it is. Then they learn the actual sounds. Actually, they learn it all together, but it's all parallel. But what comes out is of the feel of the language. It's very important. Music, language is music. It is. It has to be learned as music.
Is this why you have been using music a lot in your schools? Let's mention that you have been co-creating music content, educational music content, with your own composer.
Partly. I mean, obviously, music's very helpful. If you want to teach vocabulary or difficult grammatical structures, stick them in a song and they're there for life. Basically. I mean, most people just pick up nursery rhymes and try to teach them nursery rhymes. But nursery rhymes were created in England by political people. They weren't really for children at all. It was all about politics happening. No one was and they weren't for language teaching, for sure. They were meant for something else. And most of them were horrible anyhow. I wouldn't sing them to my children. I don't mean the tunes, I mean the lyrics. Quite horrible. So we went about creating new songs, and I have the same musician now since 1985. I work on the songs up to the age of about 8, and my 2 older children work on the teen songs, which I say is from 9 upwards. It's teenagers already. So my music isn't translated into teen music, but then again, if you go, you can see a lot of them on YouTube. For example, one of my son's songs starts, it's called Fly Round the World. We've got the world at our feet and time on our hands, give an arm and a leg to fund this trip. I mean, that's how it starts. I mean, it's all there, all the phrases, and that's how we teach.
You have mentioned the importance of early English learning. Children start learning English in your schools from an extremely early age. Why is this so important?
A baby is born with a lot of neurons, billions, 80 billion, I can't remember exactly how many, 80. And he makes more in the first few months of life. That's when the brains are most active. In fact, the brain reaches a certain plateau around the age of 2 in its development. The most important time for learning anything, is really in the first year of life. And if you didn't get it in the first year of life, do it in the second. And if you miss that, do it in the third. But really, the first years are precious beyond measure, because that is the time in which the brain circuits are really forming. And this happens up to the age of 6. But the greatest spurt is just after birth and up to the age of 1. So, in fact, they've done studies with English learning that show very clearly that we can only learn grammar in English. I'm sure it's the same for every single language, up to the age of 7. You will never really be a native speaker you'll never really have native speaker-like grammar after that. This was research done in the first. It's been reduplicated many times. In 1989, Cognitive Science, Johnson and Newport, in which they took about 46 postgraduates at a university, I think it was in Iowa. They were all of Korean or Chinese origin. They're all postgrads, brilliant. Some had been in the country since they were really young. Some had been in the country since only in their 30s. But they all had very high-level English. And they tested to see how good their grammar was. And it was very simple. There were sets of questions. There was yes/no answers. And they had to give the right answer. The bottom line is that only those who'd arrived in the country and stayed there up to the age of 7 had understood, not wrote, understood the grammar correctly. If they are up to the age of 7, after that, between 8 and 10, you see a drop, quite a sharp drop, but an even sharper drop after that. That's it. They learn like adults, which is they never really absorb the grammar properly. And these are postgrads. These aren't just any people. And they'd studied the language in depth. So you can, and this was a study that's been done and redone. You want your child to have native-like grammar of a language. Here we're talking about English. Has to be taught up to the age of 7. Has to be.
As you have just said, there is a substantial scientific background behind your teaching approach. You often refer to Glenn Domon, founder of the Institutes for the Achievement of Human Potential. Why was his work so significant for you?
I found his work very exciting. And I used a lot of his techniques with my own children and integrated a few into our teaching materials today. His work's very important. He worked with a guy called Delecarte, and he was a physical therapist, Glenn Domon. And they took people who were physically immobile, and they made them mobile. How did they do them? That could be children who were born and couldn't walk. It could be somebody after an accident, after war, something had happened. And they had techniques for it. First step was pulling yourself across the floor on your hands. The second was crawling. Then they were standing up. And it would take a long time, and they would have to have a carer helping them. And Glenn Domon tells a story that one day a little boy who was severely brain damaged was brought to him. The boy was called Tommy. He was the 4th son of parents. He had been brain damaged at birth. He was in a wheelchair. He couldn't walk. He couldn't talk. He was 2 years old. And they'd heard this man could get people physically mobile, and they thought that was a good start. They hadn't given up on him. They'd been told to put him away. He was a vegetable. But they were determined to get their son to move. And he taught him how to pull himself along the floor. Father comes back 6 months later with the kid and says he can pull himself across the floor. And his mother's taught him to read words. And Glenn Domon didn't take it very seriously. Next time he came back, he could crawl. And he said, you know what, he's reading books. Glenn Domon still didn't take it seriously. The kid's now 3 years old, and he comes back. He said he reads magazines, he reads everything, and he's walking. And Glenn Domon laughed, wrote something on the blackboard, but the boy read it, sped read it. This was a kid that was meant to have been a vegetable. The parents had worked with him. Now, the brain is a wonderful thing. And it was the beginning of Glenn Domon's, it was his epiphany. Wow. So if we can do this with the brain damaged kids, what's wrong with our normal kids? And this was his epiphany, and for me it was very exciting. I did all sorts of techniques that he recommends with my own kids. I integrated some into our work here. It was my first understanding that we have to use it or lose it with the brain. The brain is pruned. It reaches its heights of circuitry and connection by repeated input. We call it serve and return in scientific terms. That's basically the mother saying it again and the kid saying something and the mother giving it and giving it and giving it and making that circuitry a lot stronger. And it's the same with the English. That's exactly the basis of our technique. Repeated background hearing. This making the circuitry stronger by repetition. It's like, I'm sure most of our viewers who've ever read a story to a kid got to the end of it and the kid goes, again, and again. and the adult can't stand it. But this is how the kid learns. It's a learning technique for him. That's why he wants it again.
You have mentioned the repeated background hearing. It is one of the basic principles of your methodology. So what is repeated background hearing?
Repeated background hearing at home is having today, it's either with CDs or with digital audio tracks. You put it on in the background while the child's eating, playing, going to sleep. Child picks it up. He doesn't have to listen to it actively. If he wants to, he can, but he doesn't have to. But it's just play, so it's absolutely no imposition. We're not making the child do anything. We're not forcing him into anything. I call it hearing and not listening. So he doesn't have to actively listen. But when he comes to the class, you see they know it. And all of our teachers, we've done research amongst the teachers, they all report, you can instantly see the child who's not doing the background hearing at home because he's not as focused as the others. He doesn't know as much as the others. He's not as integrated into the class as the others. Yeah, you really see the difference. Yeah. If a child hasn't been exposed, if he doesn't know, if it's not familiar, he doesn't pay attention. I mean, have you ever been to a foreign country and people are talking this language all around you and you don't hear it? Because you don't know it. Same with the kids. If they haven't been hearing it at home, they're not going to pay attention to the same degree in the class.
Let's go back to scientific research. There are some recent research studies confirming this productiveness, fruitfulness of early brain stimulation. Could you give us some examples?
Well, bilingualism is the big thing at the moment, or multilingualism. Bilingualism is basically when you get two languages at once. The long-term research shows that it wards off dementia or any form of you get it. Any bilinguals or multilinguals are less likely to have dementia, or if they have it, it'll be later on. It won't be as early as the average person, which is sort of good news. But for babies and children, it's meant to improve executive functions of the brain, which means that they have more cognitive control and can attain their goals earlier, better. It promotes, they get two languages at once. They get double the amount of language. It isn't that they get less. They get more or less double the amount, which means that they have two concepts of the world. Each language, of course, is a mirror, an entrance, a window to the mind. And so they have many different ways of seeing it. They're much more flexible in their learning styles and much more tolerant in their thinking. There's been much research on this. A lot of the things that we've been doing, actually, over the years, what I've been doing, some of it I did based on science. I always knew about early child learning. But some of it I did, I think, intuitively, from my experience also working with children. One of the basic principles has always been of a teacher. You know, we train our teachers. The fuel behind what we're doing is the positive reinforcement of these children who come, and our teachers have to be highly trained to do that. they have very structured lesson plans, and the basis and what's behind it is we say 75% material they've learned before but taught in a different way, and we show in our teacher guides how to do that, and 25% has to be completely new. There's always been a principle because I could see it. I remember teaching a 2-year-old, for example, who was highly intelligent. He was brilliant. He was in a class of 5-year-olds. It was years ago. And he would never sit still. I think we're talking about 32 years ago or something, one of my first classes, when we used to integrate the ages more together. Now they're much more in their ages or according to ability. And this kid would fly around the room like an aeroplane, but he'd only come into land when he knew the material was new. And then he'd be off again. And you see it again and again. I have numerous examples of what happens when you keep showing the old material in a new way and you don't introduce something completely new. The kids really know it. And they say so even. But recently I've learned that the hippocampus really is responsible for looking for novelty. And it's looking for the new. And it's always looking for new materials to learn. So the hippocampus in the brain, it's a center in the brain, is always looking to learn new things. And so that's why the 25% new and the rest taught in a different way makes sense. On the other hand, we have the amygdala, which regulates the stress, shows the stress, and it can block the hippocampus if the stress levels go up, so it doesn't retrieve information or learn new information, though this freeze information, I'm threatened, I can't think of anything, I can't do anything. So therefore the environment is friendly and stress-free, and the kids just have a long time, and it's part of our training to make sure that kids don't feel pinpointed and that they have to perform.
You have mentioned positive reinforcement. What is it, and why is it used so much in your schools?
Just as a child learns his mother tongue because he has a caretaker or a parent who's giving him feedback, he doesn't learn it on his own. He's getting the input from them, that's where he's learnt the language, and he's getting feedback from them. That's great, that's wonderful, yes, wow, aren't you a clever boy? And that's how he learns it. He gets his positive feedback. Our teachers are trained to do the same thing. And it doesn't necessarily come naturally to a teacher, because they've been trained just to take things as they come, and the praise wasn't part of it. So if a kid does really well, the younger they are, the more praise they need possibly. But, it doesn't just have to be praise. Positive reinforcement can be a smile, happiness, the way the teacher is. She doesn't have to go overboard with, wow, you're wonderful the whole time, but a positive attitude. She doesn't say, no, you got it wrong. I mean, for kids, for example, if I show a picture of a dog and you say cat, I'm not going to go, no. The teacher would say, cat. So it's a dog. And then you'd say dog, and you'd go dog, and you go, very good. So you've forgotten you already got it wrong in the first place. It's just a matter of making sure the kid actually says it and says it right and is involved. We don't have repetition. We won't say everybody after me. The cat is on the mat. Everybody, the cat is on the mat. One, you don't need to because they have the repeated home listening. But on the other hand, it's a dreadful way to learn. Dreadful way to learn. Because the brain isn't stimulated. You're in autopilot almost when you're doing it. Whereas if you go, oh my God, where's the cat? And then the kids will say where he is. And you have the spontaneous speaking. They have to be involved. It has to be easy for them.
So repeated background hearing, positive reinforcement.
Stress-free atmosphere.
Okay, what else?
Small groups, normally up to about 8 children. In a group which gives attention. Which gives good attention on each child, and the children can participate. I just met today with a group of children in Montenegro. They were aged 9 and 10. I had full conversations with them. Full conversations. It was outstanding. absolutely outstanding, just like they were native speakers. And they were very relaxed and very happy. They have it. They have it. It's something you can't take away from them now. It's theirs. Just with this very simple technique. But actually, it's a bit more than that, to come to think of it. We have to have the materials themselves, the learning content. Because we have to have the right materials to learn with. We're not buying the average average books that most learners learn with. We have our own materials from 3 months. They have baby's best start, then they have toddler's best start, then they go into all the different levels. We have animations from the age of about 3. They work with not only repeated background hearing, but everything they learn is in animation. So they can also watch it and they become even more involved. And at a later age, it's real acting. And then we get to a certain age when we stop it. Although we have a lot of stuff on YouTube for the teens because they like their clips. They like to see them. They're used to it. It's the language they're used to today. If there's a song, they don't say, "Can I hear it?" They say, "Can I see it?"
Many teachers working in this global educational network you created say in their testimonials available online that their work is not just about English, it is about life. In other words, it seems that there are some educational aspects of Helen Doron English. There is learning beyond linguistics. So what is this about?
There's lots of different characters which bear the values of the company, because you can't learn a language without some form of value. Values are very important to children. Values about how to treat your friends, how to treat the environment, equality of boys and girls, compassion. All these are very important qualities, and they're built into our stuff. This is children's education. What they get at an early age is what they are going to have for life. And we want them to have lovely values. But teachers get into it. You know, I've had a franchisee who told me that just the principle of positive reinforcement turned her personal and family life around. When she realized it, instead of emphasizing the negatives of what they were doing, and she started praising the positives, everything changed for her. Very simple life philosophy. And people really get into it. And we have the most amazing teachers, the most amazing franchisees. I was at a franchise conference a few years ago with our master franchisees, and a new member of staff came up to me and said, "Where did you find all these amazing, like-minded people?" And I said, "Birds of a feather flock together. We're the same sort of people, and we look for each other. These are people that want to help. They want to be part of their community. They want their children to have the very best education. That's why they've looked and they've chosen us."
Let's talk about teachers. They are the third link in this chain: methodology, materials, and teachers. How do you train them? What is substantial for a good teacher?
Obviously, a good level of English to begin with, but they have to have the right personality, and they have to want to give a lot to the lesson. Our teachers put a lot into it, and they love it, because the more you give, the more you get. But they do. If there's a 3/4 of an hour lesson, they'll probably prepare it for an hour beforehand. And when they go through the lesson plan, it says all the props you must take. These are the downloads with all the games you're going to use, and everything comes together in the lesson, so it's non-stop fun and pack. And now you're going to write, and this is how we're going to do it. But we don't just write. They'll do a game around the writing to make it more fun and easier, and the children who would struggle more with certain aspects will not be struggling anymore because they've done it in different formats. So our lessons are full. How are they trained? They're trained by, well, it used to be me. I used to train them all. But now I have a crew of teacher trainers. For our English methodology, we have about 30 in the world. They're from Mexico and Ecuador. They're sitting in China. They're sitting in Korea. They're sitting mainly in Europe. And they are coordinated through our course office, and they go out and they train. Now, the master franchisees are the people who ask them to come, but they are completely separate from the business, the trainers. They do it only according to whether these teachers are good enough or not to pass. We have a teacher training course for teaching the very young kids and one for teaching the teens. And they're separate because they're often different types of teachers. And we have seminars. A teacher has to have at least one seminar every year to improve on her teaching technique, watch others teaching, learn new materials, so that they have ongoing training, and we watch them. And it's a career path for a teacher, and they love it. I've spoken to a most amazing crew of teachers here. They've come from all different backgrounds, and they've fallen into this work because they find it so rewarding.
In the book, The Language of Music, among other things, you write about your own education, which in its rich diversity provided, as you say, seeds for your future career. What were these seeds? What influenced you? You had some good teachers, but you also had some not so good ones.
I was into science more than anything else. I loved mathematics. When I went to secondary school, I loved science. That's what I excelled in. However, my parents got divorced when I was 12, and at the age of 13, I moved school because they couldn't afford the other school anymore. And in this new school, they were working on special experimental ways of teaching maths and science. And I'd missed the first 3 years. And I just didn't get it. It was a completely different way of looking at it, and I gave up after a short while and moved towards the arts. So I moved towards languages and other subjects in the arts. And when I was 16, I had a French teacher who, believe it or not, got married 2 weeks after she started teaching us, and she became called Mrs. French. But she just didn't like me. I don't know why. I think I was quite reasonable, but she really, really didn't like me. She told me I was bad and I was going to fail. Which isn't very encouraging, is it? But I was quite determined to pass. And I went out in the holidays with one of my friends, and we went to learn French, but it was in France on a campus, and everyone spoke English to each other. But I managed to get the sports teacher who was French. And that's how I learned to speak French, by actually getting to meet a French person. So I passed my exams extremely well. I got a great love of French, and I went to university to learn French because I couldn't think of anything better to do. And it was Reading University in the heydays of the 70s, when it was really that and Edinburgh the top universities for linguistics. And I heard in the first 2 days an introductory talk that was given to everybody on linguistic science. And I couldn't believe such a wonderful thing existed. It sounded fascinating. Wow, I had to learn this. So I studied that and French through my university days. And it's no looking back, you know. I often think about how I ever got to Reading, because it was my second choice and I got accepted to my first, but I'd liked the interviewer much more in Reading, and my gut feeling told me to go to Reading, and I did it. So that was wonderful. So I learnt linguistic science by chance, and it integrated all my early love of science back together again.
Mrs. Doron, you have visited the Helen Doron English School here in Podgorica today. I observed your interaction with teachers, children, parents, and I must admit that I was touched by your warm, radiant personality. I'm curious to know what are your values, what motivates you, what inspires you?
Wow. I want children to have the very best start, truly. That's why I want them to start learning with our methodology as early as possible. I actually wanted to do early childhood development. That's what I wanted to do. And I thought, okay, a good place to start, because I'm a linguist, would be with English, because we all know that language is the most complicated of functions. You have to learn intonation, phonetics, phonemics, grammar, syntax, semantics, all at the same way, morphology, I missed morphology, thank you. That's word structure, all at the same time. And it's a daunting task, and children do it superbly. No problem for the child's brain. And I know that creates more brain connections than anything else they're doing. So I said, okay, another foreign language, that'll do it. But you know what? I got stuck on that for years. Because I trained teachers, and then they needed something the next year, and the next year, and the next year, and the next year. So my passion is educating children. We've started, we have maths franchise, and we've started kindergarten franchises for accelerated brain development, together with a lot of fun and music and games around the world. We have many very, very special courses that I know are going to greatly stimulate brain growth as well as intensive English learning. So my first value is that children should get the best start. Second value is also kindness, happiness, personal balance. I personally do this. I practice the transcendental meditation technique, and I've done so since I was a teenager, and I think it has given me a very good basis for everything I do in life, giving me much more balance and a much broader perspective and the ability to focus more. I believe in life and the planet and ecology. We must look after ecology. We must look after life on this planet. I think the most important thing in life is kindness. If only people were just kind to everything, not just to people. Getting people kind to people is a very good start. But to everything, to the plants, to the trees, to the animals, kindness, compassion. What is more important in life? I myself don't eat meat. I'm a vegan. I don't eat milk products. I don't eat anything because I am a compassionate being. And I also know it supports our ecology. Because if everyone, or a lot more did it, we wouldn't be burning rainforests at the moment. Yeah. So I live my values. I don't impose them on other people, but I think that kindness is very important for children to be happy, to be kind, and for parents to understand what they can do with their children and not be so frustrated if they know they can do more. If they know they can do more. Many different techniques that kids can learn. They can learn so much at an early age. They're limited by what we can teach them or what experiences we allow them to have. That is what limits them. What they can do at an early age is limitless. It's unbelievable.
It seems that you have it all. You found your purpose, you are healthy, you make money, you are famous, your work has been appreciated, you are getting international recognition. At the end of the day, what makes you feel fulfilled and happy?
Of course, family and progress. I think each one of us, if we feel we're stuck, we're not happy. We need to feel progress. We need to feel we're getting certain level of challenges and we're meeting them. Because then we feel fulfilled because we're growing. When we're not growing, we're dying. So when we feel that we're growing, when we feel we're doing and we're giving back to the community, and we're giving. And of course, those of us who have family, I'm a grandmother. I enjoy my grandchildren and my children very much, and I enjoy seeing what they're doing, and many of them, I work with some of them. It's very fulfilling most of the time.
Thank you very much.
It's been a very great pleasure, and thank you for interviewing me. And this is my first day ever in Montenegro, and it has been a very eventful one, and you are a wonderful, warm people.
Thank you very much.